Hello and welcome to another episode of Allergy Today, the podcast all about allergies so you feel less alone. I am really excited to share the conversation that we've had this week. Ruth, why don't you tell everyone who we're speaking to?
Brilliant, yes, and we've got Claire Hussain on the line with us. She is the allergy mum of one, for any of you that use Instagram. I've known her for quite a long time. She copes with her child's allergies really well. So we talked to her about how she helps her little girl to deal with it. And she also now has her own support group called Allergy Collective to help other mums and children with allergies. So she's a really fantastic person. I learned a lot from it, and I think I know a lot about allergies.
And I'm looking forward to it too, because I'm interested in Claire's journey from being a mum who knew nothing about allergies to having to deal with a child with allergies. And I'm really fascinated to compare that to my own experiences of growing up as well.
Yeah, and sadly, things haven't seemed to have changed an awful lot, have they?
Probably not. Anyway, let's get Claire on the line now and let's have a conversation on the Allergy Today podcast.
Well, very warm welcome. Do you want to just introduce yourself and just tell the listeners your story?
Well, I'm Claire. I am the mum to a child who has multiple severe allergies. She's now 9. She's had issues since birth. She also has eczema, asthma and allergic rhinitis too. And yeah, I've just been thrown into this world and here I am. It was a long road to diagnosis, many doctor's appointments, not being listened to. It took a long time to get referred to an allergy clinic. Yeah, I've got to this point where I now feel like I've kind of been around the block a bit. We've had every issue imaginable I can think of that an allergy family would go through, starting school, going to nursery, all that sort of stuff. I now think that I would like to support other people, and which is why I've started my second Instagram account, which is the Allergy Collective, to support other people because we've been around the block.
When did it first start making itself known? Was it even pre-weaning?
Yeah, it was pre-weaning. She had eczema from pretty much the get-go. There was lots of screaming. I know she was a newborn baby, which is what it was put down to, she's crying a lot. It's because she's hungry kind of thing. We had problems with feeding, and her skin, her eczema kind of presented itself really early days. It was put down to many different things. Not one of them was food allergy until much later. So she had tummy issues. She wasn't sleeping very well. I don't think I slept for about 4 years. It felt like. And the next indication we had was there were 2 episodes. She would have hives. They would kind of come up all over her body and then disappear as quickly as they arrived. That happened twice. And so I took her to the doctor, and the doctor said, "Oh, she's allergic to something. You'll find out what it is one day."
Oh, that's helpful.
And we did find out what it was when she went into anaphylaxis after eating one bite of a peanut butter sandwich when she was 15 months old.
Oh, wait, I want to hear about this. So what actually happened then? So you gave her this sandwich, and,
yes.
And what happened?
I made her a peanut butter sandwich.
Had she had that before? Was it the first time?
No, I put 2 tiny squares on her high chair. I turned away. I turned back maybe 10 seconds later, and her face had swollen up literally immediately. Her eyes were streaming. She was screaming, head to toe, red and hot, hives everywhere.
Oh, God.
Yeah, just like grabbing at me. So I got her out of the high chair. I didn't really know what to do. I mean, I've looked after children now for 20 years, but I was just like clueless. I've not got allergies. I've never had any experience of it. Obviously, I knew what anaphylaxis was through my multiple first aid trainings. And then she projectile vomited about an hour after that. And again, back to the doctors. Oh, yeah, okay, that's fine. Just avoid peanuts. They did a blood test because in the city I live, they don't have an allergy clinic. I know they're very sparse anyway.
Can I ask how old your daughter is now, Claire?
She's 9. She just turned 9.
That's not quite what the advice I'd be expecting. She's got peanut allergies. Go home.
Yeah. So they did do a blood test to peanuts, hazelnuts, Brazil nuts and almonds, and they were all positive. Again, stay away from all of those.
Oh, gosh.
But there were still problems. She still had bad eczema. She still had upset tummy, or she was constipated. I kept going back to the doctors probably for a year. There's something wrong. There's something still not right. I think because also I was a first-time mum, that kind of glazes over a lot of any concerns you have.
What do you mean by that? The doctor sort of ignores you because you're being fussy?
Yes. Basically, I was told I was being too fussy. Yeah, basically. You're a first-time mum. These things happen. Calm down, basically.
How infuriating.
Yeah, it was infuriating because you know your own child. As I said, I've worked with children for years. It wasn't right. So eventually, after keeping a food diary, taking pictures during reactions, they did some more testing. This time it was dairy and eggs, tomatoes, chickpeas, blood test again, because they still wouldn't refer us to the allergy clinic, and they were all positive.
I find it amazing that they wouldn't refer you, yet they knew by now there was a list of what? You're getting nearly 10 allergies.
Yeah, regular reactions this poor little child is having.
Yeah, every week she was having a reaction. Every day she was had bad eczema, no sleep, etc. So I still had to fight to get this referral to the allergy clinic, which is in the next city, about half an hour away. I'd also asked for adrenaline because she'd had anaphylaxis to peanuts and I wasn't allowed to be given them.
So how old was your daughter by the time you got to the point where you'd had these tests?
A lot of blood tests were done just after she turned 2, and I think we first saw the allergy clinic just before she was 3.
And the first indications came when she was 15 months with that peanut allergy?
The anaphylaxis, yeah, there were, like I say, there were issues prior to that. A few times her dad tried to give her scrambled egg. He would put a tiny bit in her mouth and she would literally like kind of make a face and then push it out of her mouth, which obviously looking back now, you know, she's...
Yeah.
That's really interesting because we've heard this a few times that children at that age will try and reject the foods that they're allergic to, but it's regarded by adults as a kid being fussy. Shovel it in. And people don't listen enough to nature, do they?
No, that's right.
And I really think that the people don't listen enough to mums, and I don't understand why they don't, because the mum knows that kid better than anyone else, and it's just, I find it so infuriating.
But I can understand that because we all know them, there are an awful lot of mums who are a bit protective.
Of course, like so many, yes, I see that. But if you have a child who's having multiple reactions and you have a mum saying,
it's a big red flag.
Right, then you listen to the mum.
I think it's awful that we just send people home saying...
But this is the medical profession, that it's dealing with everything in isolation. Medical training doesn't teach them about allergies.
It's not a mum being fussy if their child's got eczema and is having anaphylactic reactions.
No, absolutely not. But an ordinary GP, it's just a raft of things. You know, here's some pills, go away. Avoid this. Claire, is that the frustration that you share as well? Is that we clearly weren't getting it through to your GP practice?
Yeah, it was stressful, very stressful, and time consuming as well. There were so many doctor's appointments that could have been used for other people.
What I feel like is missing, and what seems to be the case with lots of things like this, is that I do feel like there needs to be some kind of link between a GP and the support like you offer, Claire, or, you know, somewhere else that they can go to just kind of try and navigate, because otherwise you're just left on your own, aren't you?
I think now there is a bigger emphasis on getting children help sooner, because I think it's so prevalent these days for small children to be allergic to milk that the help is kind of a bit more forthcoming than it was.
Yeah, I think they have updated the NICE guidelines.
I mean, going back to when the blood test for milk and egg and the others, when those results came back, the GP said take them out of her diet, full stop, which we did.
Was that hard to do?
It was. But then when we had the results for dairy and egg, I sat on my sofa, I remember it so vividly, and I sobbed because milk is such a big part of a child's life. Looking back now, I was so upset. I was thinking, you know, you can't just have an ice cream when you go out. You can't have, you know, milk at school. You know, all of those things were just running through.
Did you get advice on that, Claire? Did they give you some support on her diet?
So that's the advice we had, take it out of the diet, like I said, which we did. And by the time we got to the allergy clinic, it had been out of her diet for a year and it had been too long. And so now she's severely anaphylactic to milk, whereas before that, she was having dairy products probably on a daily basis. So her body now reacts severely to it. And I think her consultant told us they call it mind the gap. If you remove something from a child's diet, you take it out for 6 weeks and then you try and slowly reintroduce it. So your body does not then believe that the whole protein, for example, is a foreign body and something to attack.
I think you're right about that, Claire. So I think I did that to myself. Because you don't want eczema, do you?
No,
So
no.
I completely cut it out, and then the next time I had it, instead of having eczema, then when I had it by mistake, I was having anaphylactic reaction. So you don't know whether that would have happened anyway, but I certainly inflicted that on myself as well.
Yeah.
I did that.
What is her name? Sorry, Claire. What's your daughter's name?
Bikita.
Nikita. What a gorgeous name. How has it affected her as a personality? Is she pretty stoic?
She's pretty amazing with her allergies. Even at a very small age, she would never take food from somebody else's plate or accept food from somebody else if it hadn't been checked by us. She's very careful. She has anxieties around, obviously, food, social occasions. I've seen kind of firsthand the psychological effect it can have on a person who actually lives with the allergies rather than from my point of view.
When did you first notice that she was becoming aware of her allergies and therefore having to be careful? What sort of age was that?
It was preschool.
I think that's interesting because I'm trying to remember now when I first was aware that I had allergies. And Ruth, I wonder about you. How old were you when you sort of realised that you had to be careful? Were you conscious of it?
Not preschool, but my first proper school, where we had school dinners. That was when I first really became aware of it.
I think I was probably about 3 when I knew there were things I couldn't eat, and I would tell people I can't eat that, and they just thought I was a precocious 3-year-old and shoveled them more into me.
Yeah.
Children do know, and it's their ability to express that and the ability of their parents to recognise that they're expressing something that is not right.
I've always detested milk. The smell of it, the taste of it is absolutely vile to me, and yet I was forced to it. As a kid, you were. We had milk every day at school.
Yes, you were. Yeah.
I had chronic eczema. There was never that the connection was never made back then.
So Claire, you've been looking after children. You've been doing childcare for 20 years. So prior to your daughter coming along, you must have seen other children with allergies and known what to do. What was your view of allergies in other children before you experienced it firsthand?
To be 100% honest, before my daughter, I hadn't come across it with any children that I looked after. I'd come across asthma and eczema, but I hadn't ever looked after a child that had a food allergy.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It's craziness.
Your desire to help other people, because you have an Instagram account, Allergy Collective. Let's give that a plug, Allergy Collective. And so now you help other people. When did it dawn on you that actually you could do that?
It was probably about a year ago, 18 months ago. It's just a very lonely place to be when, you're given the diagnosis, and to know what can happen. It's a really scary place to be. The Allergy Collective, it's just support, and to know that there are other people going through or have been through what you are. Obviously, I'm not a medical professional in any way, shape or form. It's not about that. It's just about support and kind of empowering people.
What sort of support do you find people get the most out of?
It's kind of solidarity. To know that your feelings are valid, to know that, like I say, you're not alone.
And where did you find support, Claire? Obviously, you eventually got some through the medical profession, but did you find other resources helpful?
Actually, in the early days, the anaphylaxis campaign was very helpful for us. Our allergy clinic, I must say, are absolutely fantastic. We couldn't have asked for, service, I suppose. They have kind of like an all-round service, actually. They have psychological services. Play therapy. My daughter's had some play therapy with them for a needle phobia.
Explain the needle phobia, play therapy.
It all came about with her skin prick tests. She would literally be petrified and scream the place down if anyone even mentioned the words. And the play therapist worked with my daughter she kind of gave her back control.
You've painted a picture of dealing with your local GP who was just batting it away and saying, go away and deal with it. I'm summarising. And then you got to the allergy clinic. Was that like a sort of a moment of revelation that somebody knew what they were doing?
It was massive relief. Obviously, being referred to and being seen by an allergy clinic does not take away what you're going through. It was just relief to be seen by these specialists who. Sorry, there's a.
They're not going to sell many ice creams going at that speed.
The other thing I remember is because we'd waited so long to see this specialist, putting so much weight on this one appointment, we had a million questions. We just went in and the allergy nurse probably didn't know what hit her. It was a barrage of questions. They answered them all very nicely and really helpful.
Yeah.
But how did your husband cope with it, Claire?
he's very practical based. I'm much more emotional over the whole thing. You know, I've suffered anxiety myself over the what ifs. The what ifs are such a big thing when you're living with allergies.
Can I ask you a personal question?
Maybe.
First of all, how do you feel like having allergies that you have to learn about and deal with? How has that affected your relationship with your husband?
You have to be in it together. You have to be on the same page to be able to deal with it effectively. You have to know how each person reacts or deals with the situation to be able to deal with it as a couple and remain calm, obviously, in stressful situations. If you need to use an EpiPen on your child, for example, or, you know, things like that, just knowing how each other works, I suppose. It's made us more aware of each other's outlook, I suppose.
Sometimes going through something together as a couple, it can strengthen relationships. Yeah. And it's both of you that are in it. Well, it's the three of you, isn't it?
Claire, tell me about the paraphernalia you carry around with you whenever you take your daughter out.
We have a medical bag. It's bright orange, which my daughter hates now, actually. We have 2 EpiPens, asthma inhaler, spacer, bottle of antihistamine, and obviously the syringe. Her care plan is in there too. It's quite a large bag. I find it hard to find a medical bag that isn't really obvious. And she doesn't like being singled out. That's a big thing for my daughter. I don't.
That's important for children because they want to feel normal. Yes. And having those bits that say, look at me, I'm not normal.
It's a real big thing.
It's a real risk of then being bullied and all those other things that come with growing up, which are just painful.
I've always felt a bit like the freak or the weirdo all throughout my life, and I've always tried to make a bit of a joke out of it, but it does chip away at you inside. And even though you can try and laugh about it, and people call you special needs, and oh, she's a nightmare, and they don't mean to be unkind when they say it, but it is quite hurtful always feeling like you're excluded. You can't eat that, you can't do that, you can't go here. You have to get on with it. You have to. That's what life's all about. But it's just learning to deal with that and realise that it doesn't make you less than anyone else. It's just a different condition that you have to deal with. That's the hard thing.
And kind of reframing her thoughts, if that makes sense. Because there's so much, as you know, that I can't do this, or I can't eat that, I can't do this, I can't go there. Just switching it to, so for me, you know, sometimes I will forget that she needs cupcakes the next day and I will be there at 11 p.m. making cupcakes rather than sitting there and being like, oh, I've got to make cupcakes. It's just switching up my thoughts to, I get to make her cupcakes. I get to make her safe food, so I know she's safe. And it's such a small thing.
Oh, that's a beautiful way of looking at it.
It's really effective.
Yeah.
I actually came across the tip on Instagram, funny enough. There's a lady called Anna Martha.
Yes, she's brilliant.
It's just reframing your thoughts, and your mind is such a powerful thing, and it has such an effect on your whole well-being that just that one small thing really makes a difference.
She specialises in anxiety, doesn't she? She does great stuff. So anyone listening, definitely go and check her out as well. And she's Anna I've never pronounced it.
I think you pronounce it Martha, or one word, Anna Martha.
That's amazing that you're able to apply that, Claire, and really feel the benefit. Because I mean, I obviously talk a lot as well on Instagram about reframing and changing mindset, because it helped me so much in times, you know, in a lot of difficult times.
Yeah.
And that we forget how powerful that can be, actually. But when we're looking at, I think that's another brilliant thing about Instagram and podcasts, for sharing these little tips and just showing that it can actually make a massive difference.
Because there's all these other things you can eat, and how lovely they are.
I think with my daughter as well, although we try and do that as much as possible and focus on what she can do, sometimes it just feels rubbish. And it's letting her know that it's okay to feel rubbish about it, but don't dwell on it, which actually is a very hard thing to do sometimes.
That's a very good point, because you are different and you can't change that. So at some point you have got to learn to live with it.
Brilliant tips, Claire. Thank you so much.
Claire, I'm going to ask you a question we ask all our guests. It's called our magic wand question, and here is our magic wand.
Ooh, lovely.
With everything that you've learned over these last 9 years as an allergy mum, what's the thing that you would wish for most that you could change in the NHS or change through legislation, or just make people with allergies' worlds better?
Does it have to be one thing?
You can have a bonus wand.
One thing that initially came to my mind is legislation around the wonderful, or not so wonderful, may contain labels. They are the bane of my life and the bane of your life, I imagine. There is no legislation for those labels, so people use them when they want to, when they don't want to, if they have any basis, if they don't have any basis. Yeah, it's not helpful.
I think that's really interesting, because that's one of my bugbears, is that the may contain label might as well be there, it might as well not. It doesn't tell me anything, because the food manufacturers use them incorrectly.
Yes.
It does worry me a lot, because what does it mean when there's nothing? When there isn't a may contain label, what does that mean? I kind of think, oh, I'll trust that product, but does that just mean they haven't even bothered to even put may contain?
Well, here's the daft thing about may contain is if they have an environment which doesn't need to say may contain because their environment is nut free, they don't need to put a label on. But then the people who haven't got a nut-free environment, who can't be bothered, they don't need to put a label on either. So the whole thing negates itself. I absolutely agree with you, Claire. I would change that legislation tomorrow to make it as important and as legal as the nutritional information they have to put on.
I recently followed, I don't know if you did yourself, the conference for the British Society for Allergy and
Clinical Immunology, yeah.
That's the one. And they looked at products with may contain labels and products without may contain labels, and they tested both. And for milk especially, the ones without a may contain label had a higher prevalence of having milk in than the ones that did have a may contain label on.
That's what I'm saying. If there's nothing there, people might trust it, and they blooming well shouldn't.
I spent half my life contacting people to find out what their factory's like. That's hard enough in itself. And because they all have their secrets for production and their...
So you ring up the food manufacturer and you ask them about their process?
I do, yes. For example, the big supermarkets, I know that they label if there's a real risk. But if it's something that I haven't come across before, I would phone them to find out, yes, before I go with my doctor.
And do you keep a big spreadsheet or a list of all these things, or all in your memory?
Yeah, in my head, yes.
But what you've described is exactly the journey that everybody else who has to deal with somebody with multiple allergies has to do. You have to do their thinking for them, and you have to know everything and more. It's almost like a double jeopardy, because if you suffer from an allergy yourself, you will be prepared to take your own risks. But as a mum looking after a child, you do not want them to take any risks whatsoever. So I think you probably go even further than you would if you were a sufferer yourself.
Possibly, yes.
Yeah.
I would agree with that, yeah.
It's been a long journey for you, and I'm really fascinated that you hit a barrier with your own local GP service, who weren't giving you the kind of level of support you needed. I didn't realise until you said it that every large city doesn't have an allergy clinic.
Our local hospital has a respiratory clinic who has a consultant with an interest in allergy, who incidentally I did see once, and I was told that every reaction from now on will be less severe than the last one.
That's not true either.
No, it's not true.
And that was a consultant, a supposedly expert, told you that?
Yeah. So
every reaction is completely different. It's just...
Yeah, that's the unpredictable part of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
You never know what the next reaction is going to be like.
May contain knowledge that's truthful. You should have a label on every consultant.
So when I went back to the GP and they said, but you've been seen at the local hospital with this consultant who has an interest in allergy, I said, well, I have an interest in allergy, but that doesn't mean I know what I'm talking about.
Nice one. Actually, though, Claire, I think you do know what you're talking about.
Yeah, like I said earlier, we've been around the block.
We have. Claire, this has been a fascinating conversation, and I wish you all the luck going forwards, looking after all these allergies, and no doubt discovering more, and hopefully some will recede.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thanks, Claire. It's been lovely having you on the show. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you so much to Claire once more for joining us on the podcast. I particularly found it really moving how she was saying how much it's affected all of them, actually, psychologically, having to be so vigilant, but also really inspirational how she's really focusing on that growth mindset and reframing and looking at ways that she can change how they are approaching, the hand that they've been dealt. It's so amazing.
It was brilliant. I think I can still learn a lot from that, because you can keep telling yourself this stuff, but the brain, the mind is so powerful. And the things she was talking about, how she helps her daughter deal with it, were just brilliant. I'm getting there now in quite a later stage of my life. If I'd known that earlier, it would have been so much better for me, I think.
The two things I found particularly fascinating were that the medical profession still seems so ill-equipped to diagnose and to treat common allergies at a very early age. the impression I got was just, go away and don't eat eggs. Well, thank you very
really
much.
Upsetting. It upsets me to hear that.
Yeah.
Here's your child with terrible eczema and worrying allergic reactions. I'll go home and avoid that. I'm shocked.
And the other little thing that I got out of that was the bag of medication that you carry, and actually how important it is for a child to have one that people recognise as a medical bag, but doesn't create a yoke around their neck. That's really important.
Because you kind of need to own it. Like, that's how I'm kind of seeing myself. I need to own.
Be proud of it.
My life and the things that happen in my life, and actually not feel bad about them. So you need to have it, and it shouldn't be anything that you feel ashamed of. So I've got mine in a beautiful case now, and I'm not embarrassed to show people so much now. I'm getting out this scabby medical bag that I used to have.
What Claire has talked to us about is a journey that I think thousands of mums and dads are going through, and how little has changed, Ruth, since you and I, somewhat before you, were growing up as well, coping with these things. There's more knowledge out there, but there doesn't seem to be a perfect way of dealing with it by a long way.
Claire got there eventually, and she did say how wonderful her allergy clinic was, but it took her way too long to get to that stage.
Way too long. There's still lots of work to do on fixing people with allergies, and that means we're going to be here for a long time with the Allergy Today podcast.
Sorry guys, you've got me
okay. You're stuck with
not going anywhere.
So if you like what you've heard and you've liked our other podcasts, then please give us some ratings on your podcast provider or iTunes, and don't forget to share the podcast with your friends. Even if they haven't got allergies, they will find the conversations interesting. So share and like. On Instagram, we're Allergy Today. Same on Twitter, and on Facebook, it's Allergy Today UK.
Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time. Take care and safe eating.
Allergy Today is a Quidem Productions podcast.